When Alec Egret was still just a troublesome kid who spent most of his days doing pointless activities like fishing near the capital, a flamboyant magician named Elders suddenly came up to him and asked whether he had any interest in learning magic. At first, Alec assumed that Elders was an agent sent by Diddy. However, it soon became clear that Elders genuinely wanted to teach him magic. Before long, Elders began instructing Alec on how to cast spells by forcing him to imagine the friends he would meet in the future and how he would someday need to protect them from monster attacks. Because of these trauma-filled training methods, Alec was able to grasp magic at an incredible speed. Even so, he felt disappointed that it took him an entire day just to master a single spell, and he completely ignored Elders' muttering that ordinary people usually need an entire month to learn the same spell. Eager to continue, Alec excitedly asked Elders to teach him another spell, but the magician told the overly enthusiastic boy that learning one spell in a day was already enough. Alec was unhappy with that answer, but Elders stood firm, and the two decided to spend the rest of the day fishing instead. Alec sulked and pouted the entire time. Eventually, Elders boosted his ego by telling him that he possessed exceptional talent for magic. He explained that even without his guidance, Alec would eventually grow into a powerful magician and that he should simply leave things to fate. Alec was stunned by this and questioned Elders about why he was teaching him magic at all. Before Elders could respond, a fish suddenly bit his line, causing him to panic since he had never caught one before. Alec burst out laughing before helping him, joking that a magician as skilled as Elders should at least know how to catch a fish. From there on, their relationship as student and teacher continued, and Elders taught Alec many things about magic over time. Then one day, Elders abruptly announced that he was leaving the capital. Alec was heartbroken by the news because it meant he would never see his teacher again, but Elders left him with one final piece of advice. He warned Alec that if he ever had the opportunity to become a court magician in the future, he should absolutely refuse the position. Alec couldn't understand what Elders meant and once again asked why he had taught him magic in the first place. Elders briefly dropped his gloomy expression and spoke about Alec's late mother, explaining that she had done him a great favor while she was still alive, and that teaching Alec magic was simply his way of repaying that debt. That was the last time Alec ever saw his teacher, and afterward he worked tirelessly to enter the Royal Magic Academy in hopes of meeting him again. While studying there, Alec learned that Elders had once been a student at the same academy and had graduated at the top of his class before quickly becoming a court magician. However, he had been expelled from that position after only a few years, and Alec finally understood why Elders had warned him not to become a court magician. Instead of following that advice, Alec resolved to become one anyway so that he could change the unjust imperial court from within. In short, he succeeded and earned the position of court magician. Unfortunately, it turned out that he should have listened to Elders after all. Alec only realized this when Crown Prince Regulus expelled him from his adventurer party in the middle of a dungeon. Alec demanded an explanation, and the blonde prince coldly told him that he was being removed because he was useless. Regulus pointed out that he constantly put his life on the line at the front to defeat monsters, while the fire magician Lenny used her spells to drive enemies back and their tanks blocked incoming attacks. Meanwhile, Alec always stayed in the rear and could only provide weak support magic. Regulus declared that they had no need for a loser like him and insulted him further by saying he didn't even deserve the title of court magician. Alec tried to explain why he only used support magic, but Regulus refused to listen. Lenny sided with the prince, calling Alec a coward who lacked the courage to go deeper into the dungeon and claiming that he was always holding the party back. Nine silently nodded in agreement. Lenny then added that the only reason they had tolerated Alec until now was because the king had ordered him to join their party. Now that the prince had chosen to remove him, she saw no reason to show him any respect. Regulus accused Alec of earning the top score at the academy by bribing the professors for extra credit. He then questioned why Alec was carrying a dagger when commoners were forbidden from owning weapons. Alec explained that they would need the dagger on the next dungeon floor, but Regulus flew into a rage. He snatched the dagger away, grabbed Alec by the collar, and warned him that no one in his party was allowed to disobey him. The prince then ripped off Alec's court magician robe, stating that he was unworthy of wearing it. Completely crushed, Alec had no choice but to leave the dungeon. Despite being humiliated and dismissed, he still wanted to help Regulus and the party. He carefully prepared notes that could assist them in handling the lower dungeon floors, especially since Regulus lacked magical power. The following day, Alec went to the palace to speak with the king, but the guards stopped him and informed him that he had already been dismissed from his position as court magician. Now that he was just a commoner, he was forbidden from entering the palace without permission. Alec was shocked by this revelation, and at that moment Lenny appeared only to mock him further. She told him to leave and walked back into the palace, but Alec begged her to listen just once. He asked her to deliver the notes he had prepared to the king, reminding her that it was the king who had appointed him as court magician and ordered him to join the prince's party. Lenny took the notes from him only to tear them apart and stomp on them. She then instructed the guards to throw the commoner out, leaving Alec unemployed and hopeless in the middle of the city. At last, he realized that he should have listened to elders and never become a court magician. Just then, he heard a familiar voice calling his name. Alec turned around to see a red-haired girl staring at him before suddenly running over and hugging him. After a moment of confusion, he recognized her as Yora, an old friend from his academy days. The two sat down to catch up, and Alec told her everything about being expelled from the prince's party and stripped of his court magician position. Yora became furious and cursed the kingdom for discriminating between nobles and commoners. Alec managed to calm her down before they attracted attention. Yora then said that being fired was actually a good thing. After everything he had endured over the past 2 days, Alec wasn't even offended by her words. Yora reminded him of the promise she once made to have him join her party someday. Alec remembered, and Yora revealed that this was the exact reason she had come to the capital. She stood up and held out her hand, inviting him to conquer dungeons together. Alec was happy to receive the offer, but after being fired he had started doubting himself. Yora brushed off his worries and told him that he was the only person she wanted on her team and that no other magician could replace him. Overcome with emotion, Alec immediately accepted her offer, and Yora happily welcomed him into her A-rank party for the long term. The next day, Alec left the country with Yora, recalling elders' advice about never becoming a court magician. A few days later, news of Alec's departure reached Regulus and his party, but they didn't care in the slightest. Regulus commented that Alec had been praised as a genius during his academy days and that he had once had high expectations for him. He believed that they had wasted their time on Alec. Lenny responded that it didn't matter anymore because a pure-blooded noble would soon join their party, making them far stronger. Meanwhile, Alec and Yora arrived at Fizzle, the city of dungeons. Yora explained that the city served as a hub for adventurers because it treated nobles and commoners equally. She was eager to register Alec as an adventurer right away, but when they reached the guild, they were hit with bad news. The receptionist informed Alec that he couldn't be registered with Yora's party because they ventured beyond floor 30, and he needed to be a guild member for at least 2 years before being allowed to join them. Yora threw a fit and demanded an exception, but the receptionist refused. Yora asked whether her friend Kra had spoken to her about this, and the receptionist confirmed that Kra had indeed come and threatened them to let Alec join. However, they dealt with people like her every day and didn't budge. With no other options, Alec and Yora left the guild and rested in a public park. While eating lunch, Yora told Alec that her party had already reached floor 52 and couldn't afford to wait 2 years for him. Still, she refused to give up and decided that if they couldn't explore beyond floor 30, they would tackle the shallower dungeons as preparation. Alec agreed with the plan, and they immediately headed to a low-level dungeon filled with insect monsters. Yora cast reinforcement magic to boost Alec's speed and moved swiftly around him, effortlessly taking down the monsters one by one. However, the situation becomes serious when Yora notices that the number of insects is not decreasing at all, and instead, they appear to be growing stronger. Alec agrees with her observation, pointing out that something must be wrong inside the nest that is causing the monsters to behave this way, although the situation is still manageable for now. As they continue battling the creatures, Yora activates her shield and starts charging forward in an attempt to locate the nest. Alec warns her that doing so is extremely risky. She responds by saying that this level of danger is nothing to her. She adds that Alec seems to have lost his sharpness, because if he were the Alec from the past, monsters like these would not pose any challenge. She tells him to trust her and urges him to return to his true self. Alec realizes that Yora is telling the truth and understands that all he needs to do is regain his confidence to get them out of this situation. He recalls Elders' lesson about how he would one day need to protect his friends from danger. Using that memory as motivation, Alec decides to switch to an aggressive approach. He quickly eliminates several monsters using fireballs and finishes off the remaining ones with his dagger. Soon after, an enormous swarm of monsters surrounds them, but Yora no longer seems concerned. She casts a barrier around the two of them, giving Alec enough preparation time to unleash a powerful wide-area spell that instantly disintegrates all the insects. Once the chaos settles, Yora pats Alec on the back and tells him that he still has it. At that moment, the ground beneath them begins to tremble violently, and a massive earthworm erupts from below. The creature attacks Yora and nearly swallows her whole. Alec shouts that he will save her and tells her to activate her shield. Yora places her full trust in him and activates her shield spell as Alec summons a fire serpent and sends it crashing into the earthworm, reducing it to ashes. Yora emerges completely unharmed by the flames, and as she lands back on the ground, she rushes toward Alec. She tells him that he is still the strongest attack mage she knows, and that the battle reminded her of their days at the academy. Back then, they had once struggled against a 5-headed dragon whose hide was too tough for their weapons and whose relentless attacks pushed them to their limits. However, after sufficient preparation time, Alec annihilated the monster with a single spell. Because of that victory, they were able to clear the 68th floor of the dungeon and set a brand new academy record. Now, Alec is about to rejoin the same group of friends he once fought alongside when they defeated the level 68 boss and returned to the Magic Academy. At the time, they were celebrated as one of the best classes the Academy had seen in many years. Even their instructor, Rosie, knew there was something special about those 4 students, as they worked together seamlessly with incredible coordination. They all returned from the dungeon battered and bruised, yet wearing wide smiles because they had shattered the long-standing record of reaching and surpassing the 68th floor. Not only did they break the record, they completely crushed it, since the previous strongest party had only made it to the 32nd floor. Eventually, graduation day arrived, and Rosie released the final rankings. Rain placed 4th in the class, followed by Crine 3rd, then Yora as the runner-up, and finally Alec, who achieved the highest score by far in recent history and became the class valedictorian. Back then, they were filled with happiness and hope, joking around with their instructor and even getting punished for it. As they left the academy together, the remaining students watched them with jealousy, believing they were witnessing the birth of one of the greatest parties they would ever see. A party destined to gain legendary status, unaware that Alec would soon decide to abandon his adventurer path and instead pursue a career as a court magician. His party members were shocked by his decision, but they understood that being a court magician was easier and offered far better and more stable pay. Although saddened, they never blamed Alec and wished him success in the future, while Yora promised that someday they would fight together again. In the present, that promise appears to have come true as Yora and Alec celebrate in a bar. After drinking only a single glass of alcohol, Yora becomes completely blackout drunk. She starts ranting angrily about how they are still not allowed to explore the deeper dungeon floors, but soon falls asleep right there on the bench. Alec smiles at her, remembering that she had always been like this even during their academy days, staying true to herself. He drapes his jacket over her so she can stay warm, but one of the patrons inside the bar seems irritated by Alec's behavior. The man approaches him and mocks him for being a beta male. Alec ignores him entirely, recognizing that the man is a fan of Andrew Tater Tot. Clearly suffering from anger issues, the man raises his bottle and attempts to smash it over Alec's head. Alec effortlessly blocks the strike using a mana shield and then turns to face him. The man grins, pleased that he finally got Alec's attention. He reveals that he already knows Alec is a former court magician and remarks that he never expected someone so elite to be wandering around trying to become an adventurer. The sudden shift in attitude surprises Alec, but what shocks him even more is when the large man pulls a card from his pocket, which turns out to be an adventurer's pass, and places it on the table. Confused, Alec asks what he is doing, but the man replies that it is an apology for testing him with the bottle, though he adds a condition that Alec must demonstrate his magic if he wants to take the pass. Alec is still baffled when Yora suddenly wakes up groggily and calls the man the guildmaster, asking why he is there. Alec is left speechless, wondering why the guildmaster would simply hand him a pass. The man, however, appears relaxed about it and gives it to him before leading them to the training grounds. He explains that this underground area is where he tests parties who want to level up, and this is where Alec will prove his strength. Yora argues that it might not be the best timing since Alec has been drinking, but Alec insists that he still has plenty of mana left. The guildmaster formally introduces himself as Levy, which immediately rings a bell for Alec, as he realizes that Levy is a legendary mage who once led an S-ranked party. Levy laughs and says those memories are distant now before explaining the simple requirement. Alec just needs to impress him with his magic. With that settled, they prepare for the sparring match. Alec moves first, launching his offensive Thunderbolt spell, which Levy expertly dodges before countering with water magic and hurling water balloons. Alec avoids them and realizes that Levy has the advantage at long range, forcing him to consider a different strategy. He decides to shift the fight into close combat. To his surprise, Levy does not retreat. Instead, he slams his fists into the ground and casts reinforcement magic on himself, greatly boosting his speed. Levy then charges at Alec, sidestepping him at the last second and circling him at incredible speed before throwing a powerful punch. Alec barely manages to block it with his mana shield, but the shield shatters from the impact, sending him flying into the wall. Levy compliments Alec's toughness, noting that few people could survive that blow. Alec steps out of the dust cloud and responds by acknowledging that Levy truly lives up to his reputation as an S-ranked adventurer. Alec's calm reaction confuses Levy, who had expected fear or panic. Alec explains that he keeps forgetting he is no longer a court magician bound by countless rules and limited to defensive spells. Now that he is free from those restrictions, he can finally unleash his full magical arsenal. Levy laughs and encourages him to attack with everything he has. Alec pulls out his sturdy wooden staff again, but this time transforms it into a magical blade. Levy braces himself and once again launches water balloons toward him. This time, however, Alec successfully dodges the first attack before slicing through the next one. He pretends to press forward aggressively, forcing Levy to respond in kind. But this was all part of Alec's strategy. When Levy activates his self-enhancement magic and charges straight toward him, Alec triggers a trap, blasting him with a thunderbolt before cutting straight through him and slipping past to the other side. Levy freezes for a few seconds, admitting that Alec is truly something special since he managed to overpower his magic. To Alec's surprise, though, Levy is far from finished and decides to reveal his trump card. He equips a pair of magical gauntlets coated with dragon scales, granting him an overwhelming boost in strength. Using this power, Levy rushes directly at Alec, who narrowly avoids the strike. The impact of Levy's punches leaves a massive crater in the ground, but Alec refuses to retreat and counters by striking him with a lightning spell. Levy shrugs it off completely, ignoring the damage as if it were nothing. He pushes through the attack and throws another punch at Alec, who blocks it with his shield but is sent sliding backward from the force. Alec begins wondering what else he can do to handle this monster. Levy then reveals another ability of his gauntlets, which instantly heals any injuries he has sustained. Levy realizes that dragging out the fight will only worsen his odds of winning, so Alec decides to increase the pressure and launches a relentless assault. He starts hacking and slashing at Levy, who blocks every blow while taunting Alec to try harder. Alec responds with some trash talk of his own, which irritates the guildmaster. Levy attempts to land a devastating punch, but Alec dodges and finds an opening to counterattack. This only angers Levy further, and he continues pressing the attack, smashing into the wall as Alec nimbly slips underneath. Levy gives him no time to recover and immediately launches another strike. Alec blocks it cleanly and attempts to deliver the finishing blow. However, he is shocked to find that the guildmaster is far tougher than he appears and absorbs the damage before swinging both fists down in a massive smash that fills the air with dust. As the dust settles, Alec steps out unharmed and charges at Levy once again. This time, however, when Alec strikes, his sturdy wooden weapon suddenly goes limp, and he collapses to the ground unconscious after completely exhausting his mana. Dora rushes over at once and uses her regeneration magic to heal him. Suddenly, Rain enters the training grounds, mocking Levy for being an S-ranked adventurer who used his strongest techniques against someone of lower rank. Levy snaps back, telling him to shut up and explaining that he was only testing Alec's limits and would have passed him regardless. With that, Rain lifts Alec up and carries him to a room where he can rest, oddly sitting on his legs once inside. They talk about how long it has been since they were together like this. When the receptionist bursts into the room and urgently asks for the guildmaster, Levy grabs her by the face and drags her out with him. Meanwhile, Rain grabs several bottles of alcohol and asks Yora to tell him everything that happened to Alec. By the time she finishes, Rain is trembling with rage as he realizes that the people in Alec's party made him carry all their equipment, forced him to manage their inventory, never allowed him to use offensive magic, and even forbade him from carrying a dagger. Rain suddenly turns to Yora and asks how Alec was even able to use defensive magic, since it had been Rain's role at the academy and Alec had never been good at it. Yora explains that Alec learned defensive magic from the ground up and trained relentlessly until he became proficient, and now his defensive spells are almost as strong as hers. Rain realizes that despite babysitting the crown prince all that time, Alec was still discarded and labeled worthless. Overcome with anger, Rain shatters the bottle in his hand, which wakes Alec up. Alec is surprised to see Rain there, while Yora cheerfully announces that the guildmaster granted him the pass. This makes Alec genuinely happy, as it means they can finally advance to higher-level dungeons together as a party. However, Rain says that can wait, because there is something else they need to do first. Alec has no idea what Rain is talking about, but Rain explains that they need to take revenge. His plan is to sneak into the royal city, infiltrate the palace, and beat up the prince and his party. Alec immediately refuses, saying they will do no such thing, and Yora agrees, pointing out that fighting other parties is strictly forbidden. Alec places a hand on Rain's shoulder and tells him that simply enjoying their adventures together is more than enough, and that he no longer cares about what happened to him at the court. Rain suddenly declares that he has figured it out. All they need to do is become the strongest party in the world. That alone would completely enrage the prince, and if the kingdom ever faced a crisis, they would inevitably seek help from the strongest party. At that moment, it would feel incredible to refuse them outright. Alec realizes this is the best compromise possible and agrees to aim for becoming the strongest party in the world. Meanwhile, in another room, an injured S-ranked adventurer named Krista struggles to breathe as the receptionist applies bandages to her wounds. The guildmaster looks grim, knowing that if an S-ranked party is in danger, the entire guild is at risk. Krista tells Levy that her party is still stranded and desperately needs help. Levy immediately calls an emergency meeting, summoning all A-ranked adventurers and announcing a rescue mission to the 64th floor. Back in Alec's room, he reunites with Kra after a long time, noticing that her dual personalities have developed quite well. She asks why he is not attending the meeting, and Alec replies that he stayed behind because he is not an A-ranked adventurer. Kra instantly casts a healing spell that fully restores Alec, raising the question of why Krista needed bandages at all. Soon, Yora and Rain rush into the room, with Rain shouting excitedly that they are heading out on a rescue mission. They explain that the dungeon is unusual because magic cannot be used on that floor, forcing adventurers to rely entirely on potions. Since the S-ranked party was wiped out, Krista had to escape alone to seek help. Alec asks Kra whether she was comfortable entering such a dungeon, given that her specialty is healing magic. She angrily responds that she opposed the plan, but Rain overruled her using his veto. As they begin arguing, Yora turns to Alec and says the decision should be his, since he will be responsible for the most dangerous role of fighting the floor boss. Alec agrees to join the mission, and they soon head toward the dungeon. Standing at the entrance, Rain declares that this will mark the beginning of their party's legend. They quickly reach the dungeon entrance, which possesses an affinity that prevents the use of healing magic, forcing them to rely on potions and evasive maneuvers. Krista's teammates are trapped near the level 64 boss, but before reaching them, they would normally have to clear all the lower levels and defeat each boss along the way. Rain realizes that proceeding floor by floor would take too long. Yora then produces a magic crystal, explaining that Krista gave it to them. Using it, they can skip all the other levels and teleport directly to floor 64. Alec recognizes that the crystal must be an extremely rare and valuable item, but Krista prioritized saving her teammates above everything else, even giving similar crystals to other parties. Yora explains that the level 64 boss is an undead creature, which makes Kra nearly useless, and since Yora herself is a support mage, most of the battle will fall on Alec alone. Rain advises Alec to conserve his mana while he handles the weaker enemies, as he doesn't want Alec running out of mana when facing the undead boss. Kra agrees, warning them that from this point on, they will literally be fighting death itself and must take it seriously, especially since even an S-ranked party was wiped out here. Rather than feeling discouraged, Rain becomes more energized than ever, declaring that the legend of their party begins now. With that, Yora throws the magic crystal into the air, and they instantly teleport to the 64th floor of the dungeon. They appear inside a gloomy cave, and immediately undead skeletons rise from the ground, armed with shields and swords. Rain shows no fear at all, drawing his spear and charging forward. He cuts through the skeletons with ease, defeating several at once while claiming that floor 64 feels surprisingly easy so far. The others continue observing silently as more skeletons suddenly emerge and begin advancing toward them. Rain boldly leaps straight toward them, slicing and chopping down anyone who dares to come close. However, Yora begins to panic because Rain has moved outside the effective range of her support magic. She rushes after him, shouting for him to come back. Meanwhile, as Alec and Jaffalo watch, Azza insists that Rain should be perfectly fine since he wields an extremely powerful ancient artifact, the piercing black spear, which is incredibly hard to damage and remains razor-sharp at all times. Truly a flawless weapon for a brainless idiot. Alec calls out to Rain, asking if he needs assistance, but Rain replies that this is nothing more than child's play for him and continues demolishing every enemy that approaches. Alec smiles and starts walking beside him when he suddenly senses an eerie presence behind him and instinctively fires a lightning bolt toward it. When the dust settles, he sees no one there and becomes confused about his own actions. He tells Yora that he thought someone was standing behind her, but it might have just been a false alarm. Suddenly, he decides to investigate further, drawing his sword before charging forward blindly and slashing at empty air. Instantly, his strike is stopped by an invisible force, which soon reveals itself as the Grim Reaper. Rain grins at him, remarking that Alec isn't as washed up as he assumed, explaining that he already sensed the invisible enemy nearby but wasn't good at handling such foes. The Grim Reaper knocks Alec back and attempts to strike him, but Alec deflects the blow and leaps back toward Rain. Alec realizes that Rain had full confidence in his abilities and trusted him as both a friend and comrade to guard his blind spot. He recognizes that he hasn't felt this kind of bond in years, and that realization floods him with energy as he leaps into the air with his magic sword and slices cleanly through the Grim Reaper, killing it instantly. Turning to Yora, he asks if she knew about it too, and she immediately apologizes for not informing him. Kasha then tells him to complain to Rain instead, since he was the one who suggested it from the start. Alec smiles at Rain and vows to repay the favor someday, while Rain replies that they need to survive this dungeon first. The four companions gather close together, prepared to eliminate every enemy ahead. Soon after, both Alec and Rain charge toward the undead skeletons, cutting them down relentlessly while Yora supports them with magic. Rain is completely in the zone, showing off flashy techniques as he slaughters every skeleton in his path. Meanwhile, Karaja uses her incredible accuracy with her bow to take down skeletons trying to sneak up on Rain, though she eventually has to defend herself with her magic staff as well when they realize the skeleton waves seem endless. Because of this, Alec calls everyone back to him, declaring that he will wipe them all out at once. His teammates quickly cluster behind him as he casts a powerful thunderbolt skill that floods the entire area with lightning, reducing all the skeletons to scorched remains. Once the danger passes, Rain turns to Alec and asks why he keeps using only thunderbolt magic, since he used to cast many other offensive spells back at the academy. Alec hastily makes an excuse, saying that thunderbolt is simply the fastest spell to cast, which is why he relies on it. Rain can tell Alec is hiding something but chooses not to press the issue due to their tight schedule. Suddenly, they hear a terrifying roar echoing from ahead and assume it must be coming from the boss room. Rain immediately prepares himself, and once Yora enhances him with reinforcement magic, he dashes forward faster than lightning toward the sound. Alec is impressed by both Rain's speed and Yora's magic as he and the two other girls follow Rain through the tunnel. When they reach an open area, they spot Rain sitting atop a ledge, watching a massive monster chase a bowl-cut adventurer all over the place. Alec instantly wants to help the man, but Rain appears uninterested, explaining that the mage being chased is named Loki, the biggest jerk from a party called Rec Roma. Krazia agrees, stating that Loki is an extremely crafty support magician. Alec struggles to believe this as Loki runs around pitifully, screaming at Rain for help and threatening to haunt him every day if he dies. Rain remains indifferent to the curses and watches without concern. However, when Loki trips and it looks like the monster is about to kill him, Alec immediately prepares to intervene. Pradra stops him, telling him to wait and observe, since this is Loki's trademark fighting style. Alec watches as the monster approaches Loki, only for a trap spell beneath it to activate and blast it with lava. Alec is stunned, while Kra explains that Loki truly is a cunning magician. The monster staggers and triggers another trap, getting hit by multiple fire blasts. Loki turns back and laughs mockingly at the monster, claiming that only an idiot would trip like that. His smug expression vanishes when the enraged monster prepares a devastating magical blast. Loki realizes he is about to die and would have been killed if not for Rain stepping in at the last possible moment to save him. Loki is shocked to still be alive. As Alec and the girls move down to confront the enemy, the monster attacks Alec, but Yora protects him with a magic shield. Alec attempts another thunder spell, but to his surprise, the monster suddenly turns and charges toward Rain and Loki instead. Alec shouts a warning and fires another thunderbolt, hitting the monster directly, but when the dust clears, he sees that the attack wasn't strong enough to stop it. Realizing the monster will catch him, Rain resorts to a desperate maneuver by charging straight toward it and sliding between its legs to outmaneuver it. He then throws Loki toward Krisha, who crashes to the ground alongside the crafty mage. Yora instructs Kraria to take Loki up to the ledge while they handle the monster. Rain quickly takes position and grips his spear, ready to strike. They wait until Kra gets Loki to safety before preparing for the final confrontation. Yora boosts all of Rain's stats with her magic, allowing him to rush the monster, dodge its attack, leap into the air, and drive his spear into its face. However, the monster proves far tougher than expected, violently shaking Rain and tossing him to the ground. Yora runs to the injured Rain, but the monster tries to crush him immediately. Thankfully, Yora casts her shield magic just in time, blocking the attack and giving Rain a chance to recover. Meanwhile, Alec behaves as if he's conducting an orchestra, forming 5 magic circles around the monster. Loki remarks that creating even 3 magic circles is incredibly difficult, and being able to form 5 simultaneously proves Alec is a genius. Krager responds that Alec is capable of far more. To Loki's astonishment, Alec creates 20 magic circles at once. The monster attempts to charge them, but Rain climbs its body and stabs its tail, buying Alec the time he needs to finish casting. Rain leaps away as Alec completes his spell and strikes the monster with combined thunderbolt magic,